All right. People, we're going to get started with Ujwal. Ujwal is a dear friend of mine and a TC39 co-chair, so please give him a round of applause to get him started.
Okay, hi. Welcome everyone to this talk. It's pretty early for me, but I hope you're excited and energized for this talk. Luca totally stole my theme, but whatever, like yellow slides, that's kind of my thing. No. But yeah, thank you for being here. Before we get into the actual subject matter, I want to go over what's probably the most important thing here, a little bit about me. Here's me with the first JS spec, I don't know, something like that. I'm Ujwal. On the internet, you might find me at Raizukukin, whichever is easier to pronounce. You might go with that in person. I am from India, from New Delhi, and I live in A Coruña in Spain. It's one of the fun places, so check it out. I love open source software, the open web. It has taught me everything that I know. And also badly designed video games that hurt my mental health permanently. But I work at Igalia. Quick show of hands, how many of you know about Igalia? Wow, it's the best conference, right? But for the rest of you, I'll go over what Igalia is just a little bit. So we are a open source consultancy. That means that we work on open source software. Exclusively, as long as we can at least. We are also a worker-owned cooperative, and we work across different projects and various different ecosystems. These are, anywhere from really low-level Linux kernel stuff in the Linux user space, GStreamer, multimedia, all the way to browsers. As you might know, most important browser engines are entirely open source. So we work on Chromium and WebKit primarily, and also on compilers. So that includes JavaScript engines, LLVM, and that brings me to my area of work, which is programming language design. That includes WebAssembly and JavaScript. But I hope that's what we're interested in. So JavaScript, right? It's a weird language, but hopefully the one that we love, even though it's not that easy to love. But, we have a lot of great talks today about different subjects about JavaScript, how to do X, Y, and Z about JavaScript. But that sort of irks me a little bit because, nobody asks how is JavaScript. But, okay, why? I mean, if we tried to dig a bit deeper into how is JavaScript, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now, and it'd be a language that serves its core users rather than hurt them mentally. But to get into like why it is like that, I think we should focus on like what makes it evolve, right? Did you know that JavaScript is a standardized programming language like C or C++? And unlike Rust, it's a real it's a good programming language that is standardized. It means that various different stakeholders come together to evolve it. But how does this happen even? So first of all, what is even a standards body? Have any of you ever participated in any standards body whatsoever? No, okay, a few people. But, do you remember this whole fiasco about emojis? So, why does like the Google emoji have cheese on the bottom? Like, it's just cheese on the bun, but that sort of is the issue with standardization, right? Unicode can standardize that you have to make a burger, but they can't make you make good burgers. So it might be a very useless burger. But it is a burger. I guess, it's obvious that all of these are burgers, but sometimes the lines can be a bit blurry. But this is how standardization works. So we have all of these various standards organizations. You might know about WHATWG, about W3C that standardizes a lot of the web as we know it, ISO, which does things like how tall your ceiling should be, and everything else. It's very important. And that brings us to ECMA. ECMA sounds difficult. I think it was like Brendan Ike who said that it sounds like a skin disease, but I promise you that it's less painful than that, because ECMA is important actually. But Unicode, we already talked about that. That's a standards organization that does useful work as well. And so many other things. ITF might be popular among FOSDEM attendees, for instance. But all of them strive to do basically the same thing, which is bring different peoples, different parties, stakeholders together to unify on a certain vision and make things easier for everyone, hopefully better as well. TC39 also is one of the more descriptive names that we have. TC39 is the technical committee that defines the JavaScript language. Quick question, does anyone know why it's TC39? Like why 39? Why?
Comes after 38.
Yeah. The first 31 failed. This is 38 failed. No. But it's the 39th, so that's why there's TC39. But who is TC39? Like what makes up this abstract sounding entity? You might realize that there's a few people that you like in there. There's regular delegates in TC39, so these are different stakeholders. For example, implementers, these are people who build different implementations that run JavaScript. So it could be your Apple, Google, Mozilla, Microsoft delegates. Then there's different companies that build big JavaScript code bases. It could be big web applications. It could be something more interesting than that. That includes players like Sony and Bloomberg. Then there's student bodies and nonprofits. So various universities. I don't know if ULB actually is a part of TC39, but definitely, yeah, no. So there's a few different universities that we work with, students who are excited about JavaScript or professors who have to teach this language and want to make it better, or bodies like the OpenJS Foundation that represents different open source projects in the JavaScript space. Then there's invited experts. Now these are individual people who are invited to the committee for their expertise or some area that they could help us standardize things in a way that fits the needs of users. So usually it includes subject matter experts. Let's say, for example, that we're building a library that does time zone handling. None of us know how to do time zones, so might as well include somebody who has some idea of how time zones work. It's hard to find that person, but if we can, time zones. But there could be community representatives. There's people who either are very influential in certain parts of the community or are very aware of the needs of certain communities, and it's very important to invite them so that we can get their perspective. And there's the cast of everybody else. There's contributors who help us basically do everything, editors who look after the editorial health of these different specs that we publish. There's people who review different things. And the community at large, I would like to believe that they're a part of TC39. That said, as we will go through the rest of my presentation, you'll realize that it's basically my bit to get you all excited about TC39. So hopefully the community will play a better or bigger role in things moving forwards. But let's see how that happens. First of all, how does TC39 work? It might be boring if you already know, but this is very important because unless you know at least vaguely how things progress, it's very hard to just go in and try to contribute, right? Because somebody else might have completely different context than you, and they might say, hey, thank you for your review, but this is very badly timed. So how can you optimize for best engagement whenever you want to contribute with TC39? First of all, if you take away one thing from this whole talk, this would be it. No decision in TC39 is ever voted on. We also don't force people to do certain things certain way or go on sort of some technical criteria for doing certain things. Rather, we build consensus. So everything that happens in the JS language needs to have consensus from the various stakeholders that are there. So this is very important, and this only works if we have these two things. First of all, we need to have a diverse set of people in the committee. If the committee is just people with essentially the same interests, there's no point of consensus. I mean, they're virtually aligned on everything. So it's very important to take these different sides of every argument. There's the perspective of somebody who is an implementer, who is very focused on the technical details in some aspects. Then there's practitioners, people who actually write JavaScript and care a lot about the ergonomics. There's people who are academics, for example, who are more interested in how do I even teach my students how to do any of this. Secondly, it's important that any objections that are made to anything is done in a way that is respectful to other people's work. You can't just come in and say, I hate your work, please stop doing this. Instead, you must elaborate your concerns. You might have to say what would make you change your mind, for example. And this is important because at the end of the day, no stakeholder should have more power than others, right? If you're not in control of, say, an implementation, that doesn't mean that your opinion on certain things matters less. It could mean that it is more important than people who are so immersed in a certain area of work that they don't have the perspective that you do. Most importantly, though, all the concerns must be rational. You cannot just say, I hate this feature because it looks weird. Like, you might have to explain your reasoning for why you object to certain things. So yeah, that's how we build consensus. This consensus is built in stages. So we have a stage process. We'll go into this later, but there's basically 4 different stages of maturity for everything that we do, which means that at a certain stage, a certain kind of decision making might be more important than the other. So yeah, we'll go into that a bit more. But these are basically different steps in the evolution of any proposal. So we go from something very theoretical to something that exists out there on the web. And I'll explain how that sort of materializes. We have different task groups that do certain tasks. Now, obviously, TC39 as a whole is responsible for certain things, but a lot of deep technical, dirty even responsibilities lie in individual task groups, which tend to meet more often, and discuss basically more technical matters. These are TG1, which is the sort of core ECMAScript specification. That's virtually everyone in TC39, although maybe not, because certain people are only interested in a single task group and not JavaScript writ large. So, to each their own. TG2 is about internationalization. This is where I've spent most of the last couple of years working. TG3 is all about security in certain special contexts where maybe you need something special compared to like regular browser security model. Is if a lot of the security model of the browsers is very specific towards browsers. Then there's source maps, which is relatively new. We have an editor of the source map spec, but there's already a source maps spec right now. So I hope you're excited about that. And then finally, we have another new task group, which is for research on language standardization. This is quite a bit more academic, and if any of you are into that, then I would implore you to check it out. Where does all of this activity happen, you may ask? Primarily on GitHub, right? So we have a GitHub TC39 organization where there's a bunch of these repositories, and as you might notice, one of our repositories is ECMA 262, which is the JavaScript spec. So everything that is the JavaScript language, standardized and specified, is entirely in this repository. You can go and check out the different issues. You can maybe fix a bug, or just like, open an issue and let people know what you think about certain things. But be respectful. Then there's different like meta repositories, as you might see. There's things for tracking different proposals. There's things for notes. But basically, every single TC39 proposal that is ongoing at the moment is a repository here. So anything that you might want to express yourself about or get involved into is going to be on this single organization. So I hope that this is like, the funnel that brings you into anything you're interested in. Then we also have literally the ECMAScript spec. It's on a website. Here's the website, but if you search around, you'll find it. You can read through it if you'd like, and if you don't care about your sanity. But most importantly, there's different parts of the spec where you can see exactly how the language it has these different semantics that actually play out when you write your code. So that's the spec. When do we meet? We have these big plenary meetings where everybody comes together and all the big movement happens. So this is the only place, for example, where a proposal may advance a stage that we talked about, these stages. And these 6 meetings per year are either online or in person. Right now, we have reached a fun cadence of 3 and 3. So 3 meetings are entirely online and 3 meetings are in person with online participation, with each of them being in one of the continents, either in the Americas, in Europe, or in Asia. Then we have these more focused calls or different groups that can meet more often, that talk about some specific areas that they're interested in. And then there's more like administrative calls like the TG2 call, like that does everything about internationalization. There is the editors group that meets every week or so to talk about their work. There's outreach calls. Every proposal might have their own call. There's a call for educators, for tool makers. Basically, anyone who might have some important feedback to bring to us or, some bone to pick can be found in one of these calls. And some of these are open to public participation. So if you're interested, then here's a way to get involved quite easily. Now, let's talk about the next it's an inside joke, but you'll see. The stage-by-stage process. So first stage is stage 0. We start with 0 because, we have to. We're programmers. The first stage is straw person. And I represent it with the light bulb because it's just an idea, right? It could be something that you've scribbled on a piece of paper. It might be something that purely exists in your head. Most likely it's an explainer document. And an explainer document is basically a document, preferably Markdown, that explains kind of your idea, the motivation, something that exists, sort of prior art, and how you're going to achieve something. But most importantly, it's an idea under discussion and consideration, but it is not yet a proposal. It's at best a heavily oversimplified proposal, but it's not something that has actually been accepted at any level by the committee as, something legitimate. It might be just too early for that, or it might be a very unpopular idea, or none of those. But that's what stage 0 is, essentially. There's a lot of stage 0 proposals. As you might see, some of them are just abandoned. Some of them are fun. I don't know. If you're interested in any of these, I don't know, maybe not the most productive set of proposals, but yeah, do feel free to sort of put your effort behind these. Then we have stage 1, which is a proposal. You might say they're all proposals, yes, but this is where the proposal gets real, right? Essentially what happened is you had a stage 0 proposal, you brought it to committee, and the committee by consensus agreed that this is a problem, right? And this is the important part here. By this stage, we are not talking about solutions yet, because it's probably unproductive to talk about solutions at this point. The more important thing at this stage is the problem. The first thing that we have to agree upon is a problem statement, that there is indeed an issue in the language, and it needs to be changed somehow. And the solution is very much up to where things sort of go after this. But finally, things are starting to get serious, so this is where we start to devote actual time, either in committee or outside, but probably both. And you also get a champion. Now, what is a champion? Is it somebody who takes a great sword and fights people? Kinda. Online. But mostly it's like, somebody who is on the committee and is basically responsible for managing the lifetime of a proposal, right? It's somebody who brings the proposal to the committee and says, hey, we need to get some work done here. This is also where we start dealing with some demos, some polyfills, and where all the major changes happen in any proposal. An example of this is Signals. Any of you use Signals in your applications or are excited about Signals? No? Okay. A few of you. Signals is one of the ideal stage 1 proposals, in my opinion. It's something that is widely popular, from what I understand, in the front-end ecosystem at the very least, and it's something that we are starting to investigate more deeply in the committee. So this is kind of how it looks. Not very important yet, because as I told you, stage 1 means everything could change. So don't get too attached, is what I mean. Then there's another stage 1 proposal, that's Decimal. I don't have to explain a lot about this proposal. And yeah, stage 1 proposals for the TLDR, there's a few of these that we're working on. Type annotations might be popular, but basically are all of these things that we're working on, that we're actively exploring the problem space and trying to figure out what works best. Then we come to stage 2. I have a construction emoji for this, but we call it a draft. This is where certain precise syntactic and semantic details are starting to basically come into place. It's like a puzzle that is starting to come together. This is the part where we lay down the actual spec text. So we start specifying things, and as you might have realized, this is where we have to define certain semantics and API. These are not completed at this stage, but it is certainly something that starts getting fleshed out. And an important thing here is that TC39 expects at this stage that certain things would be developed in the future. Now, there might be cases where things still fall apart after stage 2, but it's not by design. Also, things at this stage are highly experimental. It's not stage 1, but still a lot of the problem space is still getting explored. People are on their computers typing furiously and trying to figure out what's the best solution for anything. But most importantly, from what I said, this is the area where we're actually in solution territory now. The only issue is that we still haven't unified on a single solution, and we're probably exploring a bunch of different ideas to see what works best. An example of a stage 2 proposal is async context. I have some examples for how async context works, but that's not very important, and I'm running behind on time, so let's be quick, but async context. And there's a stage 2 proposal for extractors. So, something you might be familiar from Rust, I believe. And after stage 2 comes, drum roll, stage 2.7. So we have a stage 2.7. Why 2.7? I don't know, because we're nerds. But why introduce a new stage? Because we realize that there's something wrong with the life cycle of a proposal, which is that you are constantly working on these different details in stage 2, and then on stage 3, as you will hear from me in a bit, you're supposed to start implementing things, which means that there's a small window of time between those two things happening where the feature might be done, like whatever we're working on, but there's no test, so you can't actually start implementing it. And we started to be more mindful about these things, so we decided to put in a separate stage that hopefully doesn't take a lot of time, but this is the stage where you literally stop making changes and start writing tests. So we call it this candidate stage, but essentially the idea is that the details that we have done so far are approved in principle, but it still needs feedback from testers. So we start writing extensive tests and make way for implementations. There's these different areas where you might feel like getting involved. There's the test 262 repository. It's literally the conformance test suite for this standard that we write, and it's one of the more fun JavaScript projects in my opinion. And yeah, do contribute, and you might feel like you know a little bit more about the weird quirky details of our language. And there's also this dashboard by our friend Canada Honk about test 262 coverage in different engines and so on. An example of stage 2.7 is deferred evaluation. So you can defer evaluating a proposal until it's actually used. Another one is Shadow Realms. This has nothing to do with Yu-Gi-Oh, I think, but I told you we're nerds. But okay, things are getting out of hand, but bear with me. So yeah, Shadow Realms is real, like it's a real object that's called Shadow Realms, and I think that's the most interesting detail about it. Then there is math.sumPrecise. We might not be able to get decimals, or at least quickly, but we can actually at least precisely add numbers. So that's a first. But yeah, so basically it allows you to do better addition without losing some precision. Then there's stage 3. This is where things are actually recommended for implementation, and we start getting feedback from implementers and from actual developers. The most important thing though is that this is the point where we take off our opinion hats and try to listen to more feedback from people. And yeah, things are tested. You can implement them in your engine, and things might be shipping at this point, with or without a flag. I hope that this is a popular proposal. It's something that I personally worked on, but one of our better stage 3 proposals is Temporal. From what I hear, it's now in Firefox Nightly, so do check it out. And we have a talk later today about it. I don't have to say much about Temporal. I think this statistic says it all. It's by far the most popular proposal in JavaScript. And yeah, I hope it really helps developers as much as we want it to. But yeah, a quick example about Temporal. You can do fun sort of daytime math things with it that were not really, I wouldn't say possible, but easy to do so far in JavaScript. And all of these different operations, time zones, somehow work. Wow. And then there's decorators. This might be also something that you use in your code base already without even noticing that this isn't yet, it is now, but it hasn't been for last 20 years or so, something that was implemented in the language itself. But yeah, you can have, it's not exactly what people use in their applications, but it's a bit more restrictive version of decorators. And then finally, we have the final stage, which is stage 4. Everything is done. We have processed all the feedback that we got, and we need to call the project finished. It might not be shipping everywhere yet, but this is kind of the moment where we keep down our pens, add the version to the next edition version of the spec, and call it a day. An example of this is array buffer transfer, which allows you to write code that could be optimized by the engine. Set methods. I have no idea why these never existed so far, but now you can do actual stuff with sets. Wow, they're useful now. And a bunch of different proposals that are, by this time you might have noticed that the proposals are getting continuously filtered down to the point where everything that ends up here is more or less, something that we all find useful in one way or another. And then we have all these different tools like Babel and SWC or TypeScript that implement even newer features. And like every year, we introduce a new version to the spec. So yeah, the next edition will come out in June. Finally, I would like to help you get involved here. I hope you were excited by what I talked about. But there's a few different ways that you can contribute, even if you have no experience in standardization. Really, anyone who is somewhat vaguely excited about JavaScript should be able to do any or all of these tasks. So please help out in any way you can, and do reach out. Thanks.